I don't know about your situation, but imagine for 1 second that you were just about to employ somebody and you didn't know it yet, but they had a deep dark secret and employing them was going to be an absolute disaster. And God warned you about it. Or another time, God told you about somebody's deepest, darkest secret, and the only way you could help them was if they confessed to it. What would you do? Hi, I'm Ed Morrow, and today I want to tell you about two really interesting real life and life-changing examples of God speaking to us that'll give you some practical insight. And I'm hoping it'll help you understand a bit more of what it means when we say God spoke to me. So I want to take you back a little bit, just a little bit, while I was running a business. And before I was doing that, I'd been working for this highfalutin big company. As a contractor, I'd been doing it myself. It was how I set my business up. And there were a couple of young people working there in that company, and you know, one of them, there was a boy and a girl, and the lad, he came and worked for me for a while in my business, and then he went off to Europe, actually. Let's call them Jack and June. That's not their real names. But he went off and he went abroad and he was doing some work abroad. And while he was doing that, I then employed the girl, let's call her June. And she was working for me for quite some time. And the fact of the matter was, whenever I employed people, I tried to help them as well. So, I gave her money so she could kit herself out in a new wardrobe and stuff like that, because she was down on her luck. And the fact of the matter was that her husband was a heroin addict, but I didn't find that out till, a couple of weeks after she'd started for me. She started to open up. And I was trying to be kind to her and help her, and she did have skills to help us in the business. So we were doing that, and then I had to expand the business, and I thought, I know this guy that we're calling Jack. He would be able to come over and I would try and get him away from his job. So what I did was I rang him and I said, do you want to come and do some more work for me? And I'll fly you over, tell you what it's about. I've got this new work and so on. And so he did. And he came over, and the night before he came over, God spoke to me. Now, I cannot tell you to this day what I mean exactly by that. I can try and help you to understand some of this, what goes on. But I've learned down the years now, as I've been doing this for 30 odd years, I've learned where this lands and what it means, because it's not the first time this kind of thing has happened. So I got what I can only call, what I call for me anyway, alarm bells. Now, it's not some intuitive thing. It's a definite place in my spirit, which is why I was telling you all about the spirit a few episodes ago. It lands in a place. I'm going to tell you where that is, because it sounds a bit weird, I know, but it lands in a place inside of me that's not my natural thinking. The best way I can describe it is kind of like about, I don't know, 1 foot to 3 foot behind my head is somewhere where that lands, but also down my back. It's really weird. It's not a physical thing. It's just a sense of where I am in my being. But I began to get those alarm bells in that place. It was clearly God speaking to me. There was a problem, and I had no idea what it was. But I was flying this guy across. I'd paid for his ticket, so across he came. Well, I went to view and everything, and June, as we're calling her, was working for me. And he'd come and he was having his interview, and it was all good, and it seemed to me exactly the right thing to do. And so we agreed that he would start, and as he was on his way back to abroad, I had this real sense of alarm bells that I'd had the night before, a real sense of God speaking to me saying, there is a real problem here, and while everything appears to be okay on the surface, there's a problem. So he needs not to work here. Now you can imagine the faith that's required for me to say, this is a business, remember, that I'm running, and this guy has skills that I need, and I'm going to say to him, based on nothing other than God has told me that there's a problem, right? That he hasn't got to come and work for me anymore. So I rang him up and I said, look, although it looks all good on the surface, I'm not absolutely convinced that this is going to work out for him or for me. And I think that we should call it off and you shouldn't come and work here. And then what happened was this. In the phone call, he said to me, I was a little bit worried about it because when we were at this other company, the company that they both used to work for, if you remember way back when I was doing some contract work for them, he said, I had an affair with the person I call in June. Well, you could have knocked me over with a feather because there was no sign of this whatsoever. So I was really, really relieved, obviously, that he wasn't going to come and work for me, because clearly the two of them in the same office would have had to be left alone together. That would have led to all kinds of problems for me as a Christian-run business down the line. And, you know, it would have been really difficult if I'd had that stuff going on. It wouldn't have been good at all. Now, what happened was he didn't come, I got somebody else, and that's a whole other story. But what happened with June was she worked for me for a while, and I was able to tell her the gospel, and eventually she went off. She, you know, got on her, what's the word? She stood up on her own 2 feet. And then what happened was, I don't know, about 6 months later, she rang me, and she told me about this affair herself as well. And she'd said that, but what she then went on to say was that she had gone with that child, she'd deserted a heroin addict husband because he'd gone from bad to worse, and obviously they couldn't live there anymore. She'd linked up with this guy who was pretty well to do, I have to say, and she got confirmed in the Church of England based on the gospel stuff that I'd told her. So look, there's more to the story about the guy we're calling Jack, but not for this time. The fact of the matter was that God told me something, I acted on it in faith and averted a disaster for my business. And at the end of the day, the outcome with June was really good. She's happily married with kids, and she got confirmed in the Church of England, which is a good result by anybody's account. If you've got this far in the video, it's fair to say that you're quite interested in prophecy and the idea of God speaking to us. And if you feel this video is helpful to you, then I would really appreciate it if you wouldn't mind giving it a like. And if you'd like to see more content like this, then it would be really nice if you would press the subscribe button to make sure you get all the upcoming UglyFish videos, because there's going to be loads and loads of them. Now then, on with the next story. I want to tell you about a man who we're going to call Bill. And I want to tell you this story because I kind of want you to know what you have to do, or what I've experienced anyway, when you're confronted with a situation that's really, really difficult. So, I knew this guy called Bill. Let's say he was a member of the church, which he was. I'd seen him come into the church, I'd seen him become a Christian. And one day, God spoke to me about the guy we're calling Bill. And what God said to me was that he had an affair. He'd committed adultery. And I was fairly green in those days, and I didn't know pastorally what to do. But I knew enough to know that the first thing I hadn't got to do was to say to him, hey, you know what, God spoke to me and told me you've had an affair. That's exactly the wrong thing to do, just for your education. I'm sure you would know that, you know, probably better than I would. But what I did was I said, okay, Lord, here's what I'll do. I'm going to pray and I'm going to fast for 3 days about this. And if you bring it to his mind and get him to confess it to me, I'll take it from there. Because I don't know what else to do. So what I did was I prayed and fasted for 3 days, and then I broke my fast, and then on the day I broke my fast, I took under lunch. And we were sat in a cafe, just eating away, eating my lunch. And you could have knocked me down with a feather again. He said, Ed, I've got something to tell you. I really need to get this off my chest. And he said to me, when I was in such and such a place, doing such and such a thing, I don't want to say what it is because it'll identify the guy. I had this affair with this person, this woman, from this particular country. And I was like, thank you, Lord, I've been fasting for 3 days. It's right, you've told me. I just can't believe what's going on. This is absolutely amazing. And as I was thinking that, I was being very calm on the outside. I was like, do tell me about it, Bill. What happened? I was kind of all cool. So he got it all off his chest and he felt really relieved, and he said, I've been trying to get this off my chest. I've had nobody I can talk to this to. And I said to him, well, to be frank, Bill, the other day God spoke to me about this, and I've been praying and fasting for 3 days, and that's why I believe you've chosen now to tell me about it, and it's great that you've got it off your chest. And there we sat, and we're about to go on with our lunch when God said to me, ask him about the other affair. And I was like, what? We're just going to eat now. It's like, please don't. This is really putting me on the spot, and I don't know if I've got the level of faith or whether I'm going to upset this guy, but I felt that it had been opened up and it was the right thing to do. So I said to him, do you want to tell me about the other affair you had as well? And his head dropped and he said, yeah, I do actually. And he told me about another affair he'd had while he was out and about in another country. This is a different guy, by the way, than the one before. While he was out and about in another country. And he got that off his chest. And then I didn't know what to do, because like I said, I was green pastorally. I didn't know what to do with this. I thought, well, that's my job done. I've done that. But he needed somewhere to go with it. And we were sat in the middle of a cafe. So I knew that up the road there was a pastor, a really good one. And I knew that he would be having lunch in a particular place at a particular time with some church people. So I went up to that church and I told him about it, and I sat them down together in a room. And these days I would kind of do something different. I'd be able to handle that myself, obviously, but then I didn't know what to say or what to do. I put them together, and he was able to confess all, and he was able to minister to him, and then minister to the family and all this kind of thing. But that's another example of what we mean when we say God speaks to us. And I wanted to give you those two practical examples today, just to finish off this little tiny bit of the thing we're doing, how to prophesy, when we've been talking about the idea of God speaking to us and what we actually mean. Now, the main thing that I wanted to get across today is this. We'll always have to be in an attitude of prayer for God to speak to us. If you want God to speak to you, then every day you've got to be in an attitude of prayer. And what I mean by an attitude of prayer is I'm basically thinking about God and His Word most of the day. When I say most of the day, I kind of mean all of the day, from the minute I get up, that my eyes open in the morning, till I go to bed at night. But what I mean is I'm not thinking about God necessarily consciously all the time, but I'm aware of Him, and I'm aware that I'm open to Him speaking at any time, and I do have set prayer times and Bible reading times, and sometimes I do that better than other times. But the fact of the matter is, if you want to hear from God, the number one thing, the absolute number one thing, and listen to this, the number one thing that you will be opposed from doing is prayer. You will be absolutely distracted, got at, attacked, if you like, in all kinds of ways if you try and pray. If you turn your heart and eyes and ears to God and you're trying to pray and be in that kind of way of listening to God all the time, then you are going to be distracted by our own flesh, by the powers and principalities, by all kinds of things going on in your family and going on around you, circumstances that you think, where did all these come from? That's what's going to happen to you if you get down to this. But believe me, when you pray, God speaks. There isn't any question about that. I wanted to give you these two examples. I know they're not everyday examples, and we're not walking around thinking about people committing adultery all the time, and I don't want you to think that, because I tell you now, a woman, she once heard me talking to somebody, and she said, she said, I'm worried about you because you could tell us what colour knickers I'm wearing today. And I said, white. Now look, it was just a joke and just a guess, right? But she was. And she got even more scared. The reason I'm saying that is, look, don't think for 1 minute that Christian prophetic types like me are walking around picking up every bit of information from you that there is, because we're not. It's only when God speaks. God has to do something. I've told you all that in the last few videos. God has to actually initiate something. We have to be doing something for sure, but it's the Holy Spirit that makes all this stuff happen. So don't be worried about that, but please be aware that the absolute number one thing that we have to be is in an attitude of prayer when we want to hear from God.